Welcome to the 50th episode of the Michael Welch Podcast. Let's recap the last week of the regular season in college football and tackle your upcoming conference championship week.
All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny. Daily counting every single one, I'm seeing plenty. Level up and watch that beater turn into a Bentley. See I'm stunned, so I'm all I'm thinking, please don't tell me.
Well, we sure had some interesting results this past weekend, didn't we? We had a little shake up to the college football playoff picture, although it looks like we kind of know the handful of teams that are in the discussion, so we almost have it locked in. Championship week coming up, of course, so let's hit the recap here on Thanksgiving. Number 20 at the time, Ole Miss won the Egg Bowl 24-22. The Rebels scored a late touchdown but couldn't convert a two-pointer and fell in the heated rivalry. Ole Miss was held to 2 yards per carry, one of the best rushing attacks in the country there, just kind of slowed to a crawl. Now, Jukins still had 91 yards. 17 was his longest jog of the day, so he's really kind of battened down after that. They had one turnover versus 3 for Mississippi State. Now they also had a turnover on downs and a fumble that they later scooped up. So they kind of recovered that there, but it really set them behind and just not good for Ole Miss there. Now Mississippi State managed to convert 50% of third downs versus 30% for Ole Miss. Both teams end up finishing 8-4, a great heated rivalry. Ole Miss doing some taunting at the Mississippi State fans doing some taunting at the Rebel fans after the game. Just a great Thanksgiving little snack there in between the NFL action, where of course all three of the favorites ended up winning there, but some great games and some good college basketball. So great way to start the college football slate. And again, both these teams ended up 8-4, and they'll be awaiting bowl game announcements. Black Friday brought us some good games as well. Number 16, Florida State won its 5th straight game to end the season, 45-38 against Florida. They'll finish the season 9-3, Florida 6-6. Trevor Etienne had 17 carries for 129 yards and a touchdown. Montrell Johnson had 17 carries as well for 85 and a touchdown. The Gators had 262 yards on the ground total for that great rushing attack. That'll look good for the future there. Anthony Richardson had 3 touchdown passes on a pathetic 9 of 27 passing. That's just rearing its ugly head there. Hopefully he will improve this offseason. Be nice to see him be able to throw a consistent ball there. Ricky Pearsall had 5 of those catches for 5 of the 9 passes completed for Richardson for 148 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that was pretty much the offense. Receiver there. Now Trey Benson had 111 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground for FSU. Jordan Travis is only 13 for 30 passing, but had 3 total touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 227 yards total rushing for Florida State in the crazy ground game. Now Florida led 24-7 at one point in this game. It was a 17-point third quarter from the Seminoles that helped them pull them out. Yeah, this one, and it's just a crazy game on Black Friday. But the Seminoles, great moves here for Novell, and looking good heading into next season in ACC. That looks like it might be a little bit up in the air next year. Maybe a Drake May season coming too. So hopefully 2 teams trending upwards. Speaking of Drake May, number 17, North Carolina finishes 9-3. They lost their 2nd straight game, this one in double overtime to NC State, 30-27. The Wolfpack will finish 8-4, and they were horrible from an offensive standpoint again. But UNC scored a late touchdown with time running out to send it into overtime, and they hooked a potential game-tying field goal in double overtime to lose that one. Drake May is basically out of the Heisman race. He was 29 for 49 for 233, a touch and a pick. He had 32 yards rushing and 1 touchdown. Just not enough, and 3 losses for the team. They'll be playing Clemson next week in the ACC Conference Championship game. Number 18, UCLA sloshed around and ended up beating Cal 35-28. DTR had 2 touchdowns rushing and 3 total. Zach Cabernet had 119 yards and a touch. 0 tackles for a loss, 0 sacks, a couple quarterback pressures for UCLA, just not good on the defensive side. They do finish 9-3. I would just be watching them a little bit in the bowl game to see if they might be dragging a little bit there as a possible team to be upset. But they did not care about this game at all. Jake Plummer for Cal had 294 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the season for the Bears comes to an end. They were 4-8, I believe, to end the season. Maybe they got to 5 wins. Not good for that particular squad. A close game here, a close game against Notre Dame earlier in the year, and a few more mixed in. They had opportunities and just couldn't get even enough wins for bowl eligibility. So tough there for Cal. Now, number 19, Tulane, survives number 24, Cincinnati, 27-24. The Green Wave finished 10-2. They'll be in the American Conference Championship game. Cincinnati is 9-3. This game was just not particularly exciting, especially with these other ones going on. Neither quarterback played well. There was less than 700 yards of offense. There's a turnover, a couple of sacks, like 6 penalties. It was pretty clean and good defense, not, mind-blowing lights out defense. It was just kind of a drag, to be completely honest. But Tulane will be playing for a American Conference Championship. Number 24, Texas beat Baylor 38-27. Texas makes it up to 8-4. Baylor 6-6 after making the Big 12 Conference Championship game just a season ago. Now, Texas had a -3 turnover margin, 4 total turnovers, and one because they had 12 yards per pass play and 120 more yards of offense, while Baylor had 5 yards per pass and 2.6 per run per average. Horrific there. They just sucked. Now, Ewers was only allowed to throw the ball 16 times. He was 12 for 16 for 194 yards and 1 rushing touchdown, so he was effective when he did throw the football. He was sacked 5 freaking times as Baylor tried to make things difficult for him there. So what did Sarkisian do? Well, Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson combined for 42 carries for 256 yards and 4 touchdowns. So it's just keep it out of Ewers' hands, hand it off to the running backs, and let them go. So it's a 3-game improvement for Texas. It's not quite the leap that some people thought, competing for the Big 12 Conference Championship, although had Kansas State lost, they would have been in the mix, or in the championship game, I believe. So that was not off the table heading into this final game. Obviously not a playoff contender yet. It's a great improvement from 5-7 last year. The defense, obviously, picking it up a little bit. The secondary was atrocious last year. And so hopefully they'll make progression next year. Will Ewers be a part of that? Not with Arch Manning coming to town, I don't think. We'll probably have another quarterback battle. And I just don't know what happens to him per se. It's tough to project him losing that quarterback battle already. But man, if he ends up transferring or something happens where he's at a third school in 3 years and he's not even, 21 years old yet, that would be pretty wild. But Texas, a nice improvement. We'll see what happens in a bowl game. Again, those are very hard to project weeks down the line, but not a bad finish for Texas. Baylor might actually have to find out what it's doing on the defensive end. After a great showing last season, they might have to figure out something on that end of the football. All right, Saturday. So let's breeze through some of the not as important games. So number 1, Georgia crushed Georgia Tech 37-14. The Yellow Jackets will miss bowl season, unfortunately. Quarterback Jeff Sims doesn't have great numbers statistically. He's been hurt this year, but he is entering the transfer portal. I think he has 1 year of eligibility left. He might have 2. I like what I've seen of him at times. Georgia Tech's been atrocious since he's been there, but I'd like to see what program he goes to next and if he's able to be a little bit more productive and exciting there. Number 4, TCU crushes Iowa State 62-14. This is one of the best defenses in the entire country. The offense isn't very good, but they played a number of 1-score games thanks to that defense, but they have no problem there. Shane Morris, who originally won the TCU starting job but was hurt in the opener, did play a few snaps at the end of the ball game, so he did make it in for a little bit. Duggins is a senior. He'll be leaving after this year, I do believe, and Morris will have an opportunity, unless they make a major change there through the transfer portal or something like that, to win the starting job again next year, I do believe. Number 7, Alabama won the Iron Bowl 49-27, denying Auburn a bowl game. It might be Bryce Young's final college game as he gets ready for the NFL. Number 10, Tennessee blanks Vanderbilt 56-10 and rushes for over 360 yards, denying the Commodores a bowl bid. Joe Milton was the quarterback there. He wasn't asked to throw the ball a whole lot, but he'll be the quarterback in the bowl game, presumably, as well for the Tennessee Volunteers. Number 11, Penn State mopped up Michigan State 35-16, ending Sparty's season. Sean Clifford was 19 for 24 for 4 touchdowns, showing that this team can indeed be explosive, passing and running the football. This will be a very dangerous bowl squad. Number 12, Kansas State got out early against Kansas and put them away late, 47-27. Wildcats are 9-3, and they're going to the Big 12 Conference Championship game against the TCU Horny Frogs. Now, Kansas couldn't do a whole lot of anything here with Jalen Daniels or Devin Neal, the great quarterback running back combo that has appeared there. They did finish 1-6 after the great 5-0 start. They should be back next year. They're both juniors. I don't think either one will be going pro. I don't think that's on the horizon. And Lance Leopold signed an extension. He didn't get plucked, and he's not going somewhere else. So there's a possibility, and it's hard to see nowadays, especially with the transfer portal open and other things going on. But it's possible that this top trio of head coach, quarterback, running back are back next year, and maybe they get some pieces on defense, and this could be like a really dangerous team next year. Hard to project, obviously. They could go back in the hole and go 2-10 with all these pieces back, because that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, but that would be fantastic to see. So just keep your eyes open for the Kansas Jayhawks again next year. Number 13, Washington scored 16 unanswered in the fourth quarter to pull away in the Apple Cup, 51-33 over Washington State. Kind of an odd score there. Michael Penix had over 500 yards of total offense and 5 total touchdowns, possibly re-entering the Heisman conversation there. Washington State finishes 7-5, Washington 10-2, and on a 6-game winning streak heading into bowl season. 6 teams in the Pac-12 finished 9-3 or better. USC, Washington, Oregon, Utah, Oregon State, UCLA. 7 of them are bowl eligible, with Washington State being the 7th. Now, Washington was in a weird logjam here with 3 teams at 7-2 in conference play, eligible to make the conference championship game against 8-1 in conference play USC. Washington has beaten Oregon and didn't play USC or Utah, and they didn't make the conference championship game due to some weird tiebreakers. So it's possible this team could make some claim as the best, or at least the second best team in the Pac-12 maybe, since it hasn't played either participant in the conference championship game to decide who's the winner and best team in the conference. Weirdly enough, just super, super bizarre turn of events there. So it'll be USC and Utah there. And speaking of the Utes, they were ranked 14th. They crushed Colorado 63-21. Not a whole lot to see there. Number 22, Central Florida led 1-10 South Florida 31-7 at one point in this game. They trailed in the fourth later on. They had 6 total turnovers between the teams in this game. Eventually it was pulled out 46-39 by Central Florida to lock up its spot in the American Conference Championship game against Tulane. Now South Florida finished 1-11, fired the coach. New coaching search there. They lost 4 games by 1 possession at Tulsa, at Florida, at Cincinnati, and at home against Central Florida. I don't know why they performed well against the best teams on the schedule, especially on the road, but just something I found really bizarre. So, next game. Technically an upset. Louisville had 3 turnovers. Both teams finished 7-5 as Kentucky beat number 25 Louisville 26-13. Will Levis played 11 games this season, projected to be a top NFL pick coming into the preseason, maybe a top quarterback in there with Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. Now, he had 4 games. This was his 4th game where he completed less than 15 passes. He only had 19 attempts. This was the 4th game where he threw for less than 200 yards. In the fourth game where he completed less than 60% of his passes. And only the sixth game where he's thrown for multiple touchdowns. He was 11 for 19 for 188 and 2 by the time it was done. Safe to say his stock dropped a little, unfortunately. He'll get looked at for his size, and he'll be appreciated for playing behind such a cruddy offensive line, but just not so great there. 7-5 down the stretch. Not good. Now, number 9, Oregon, going back to the Pac-12. They had a shot at going to the championship game, and they were freaking beat. 38-34 by Oregon State, who was, 19th coming in, something like that. The Ducks had a 31-10 lead, but the Beavers closed the game on a 28-3 run from the back end of the third quarter through the fourth. Bo Nix still had a bum ankle, clearly affecting what they're able to do offensively. Just like, was it just last week against Washington? His only QB design run came on a fourth down attempt. In that particular case against Washington, it was to convert for first down and run out the clock. Here against Utah, it didn't work. On their own 29-yard line, Oregon State stuffed them and then went in for what would be a game-winning touchdown. This was with about 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. The Ducks did get the ball back, drove the field, and couldn't convert a 4th and goal. The Beavers did not pass the last 4 drives of the game in running out the clock and scoring that last touchdown there. A couple of them were short drives, but over 130 of their 268 yards on the game were picked up during the last period. Now, the Beavers had 3 turnovers to 0 for Oregon, a -3 turnover ratio on the stat sheet, but the Ducks were 0 for 5 on 4th down, which is basically 5 turnovers. Tough go. Beavs over Ducks. We have games that were close here, and a majority, of course, impacted the playoff picture. So here are the bigger ones as we dive in here. Number 8, Clemson keeps accumulating 5-star quarterbacks and then picks up losses. What in the hell is going on here? Now, number 8 here is what their ranking was. They took a 14-0 lead in the first and faded down the stretch to lose 31-30 to South Carolina, who finishes 8-4 in stunning fashion. DJ Ungale was 9 for 29 for 99 yards, a touchdown and a pick. He did have 51 yards rushing and a touchdown on the ground. No Cade Klubenik, so he must have been the worst option unless Klubenik was a scratch for some reason, but he hasn't looked good in the few times he's come in this year, and DJ hasn't been benched for Klubenik other than the Syracuse game where Klubenik did nothing to help them win. So problems there. I don't know why Will Shipley hasn't been more of a forethought this season. He had 132 yards and a touchdown on 8.8 yards per carry in this game. South Carolina just came out of nowhere, of course. They only had 60-something yards rushing in this game. Spencer Rattler was 25 for 39 for 360. 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. That's not too surprising. The turnovers there, but just the volume of passing and the yardage they were able to get. They forced 3 turnovers out of Clemson, although they had 2 themselves. And South Carolina has now beaten top 10 teams back-to-back for the first time in school history, and they've single-handedly shaped the college football playoffs for this year after beating Tennessee and this squad here, Clemson. So just wild there. Spencer Rattler, all of a sudden, putting things together almost. Really just a team effort there. Just wild. Still don't know how this happened. But Clemson, man, they got to figure some things out. I wonder if we'll see a veteran quarterback from the transfer portal, which we all know the coaching staff hates using the transfer portal over there. The coach's name is eluding me, but has hated using the portal, has liked to promote from within on the coaching staff. That's clearly a problem, and they need to do some things different over there. Okay, number 6, USC beats number 15, Notre Dame, 38-27. This was arguably more important than Michigan, Ohio State, because USC could have been completely eliminated from the playoffs with a loss here, and I'm not sure that the Ohio State-Michigan loser is. So Drew Payne completed his first 15 passes, I believe, and finished 23 for 26 for 313 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick for the Irish. Maybe a good sign of things to come. USC held Notre Dame to 101 yards rushing if you take the sack yards out on 21 carries, which isn't awesome, but doesn't kill you, which is what the defense is all about over there. USC forced 2 turnovers without committing any, which is how they win games. Both teams had a couple sacks. They came into the game tied for 12th in the country in sacks in that particular category. Notre Dame had a couple quarterback hurries officially, but USC had to really navigate the pressure quite a bit, it seems like, and Caleb Williams was phenomenal despite some pretty modest numbers, really. 18 for 22 for 232 yards passing and 1 passing touchdown, 9 carries for 35 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. So less than 300 yards of total offense, about 267 and 4 touchdowns. He strikes the Heisman pose after an early touchdown, and his Heisman odds right now are minus 3,000. He is the overwhelming betting favorite. Now, I doubled down on a plus 1,400 bet from months ago on November 5th at plus 1,600 for him to win Heisman when his odds slipped for no apparent reason. And C.J. Stroud was just the overwhelming favorite, and Hendon Hooker was in there for some reason. Not some reason, but he was in the mix, and he'd just gotten pushed out of the conversation. But about 3 weeks ago, he was just an overwhelming long shot, which is just wild. He was in the midst of a 4-game stretch there against Arizona, Colorado, Cal, UCLA. He'd won 4 straight games, 16 touchdowns, 1,600 plus total yards in that stretch, which was just crazy. I know a lot of those teams aren't good. 3 of them aren't going to bowl games, but just wild. Just wild. Easy to forget that if he didn't reclassify early, this would be his true freshman season. I believe I think he's 21 now. I think he turned 21 about a month ago. He's still super young. And obviously he's been in multiple cities. He's from DC, was obviously in Oklahoma. He's slowly making his way over to the West Coast here. Just what he's done the past few years in his personal life, having to move and switch programs at such a young age, and then picking up the offenses and then meeting the different players, and just what he's been able to do, besides the awesomeness on the field, is really just incredible. And the fact that he can now win the Heisman and what would have been his true freshman year is just freaking incredible. He just turned 20 less than 2 weeks ago. Sorry, there we go. Got my stuff all mixed up there. But still, it's just amazing what he's able to do. He'll be in college at least one more season, and it's just amazing. And I really like this USC team, the offensive pieces they have, Jordan Addison, and I'll talk about that a little bit more with the Utah-USC game shortly. But just phenomenal being able to fight the different looks that were coming at them, fight through the pressure, fight through the different things that were thrown at them on the ground, to restrict the ground game of Notre Dame, to give up what Payne was doing to them, the quarterback for Notre Dame there, and still come out ahead. And he was completing all those passes, and USC still jumped out. It shut him out in the first quarter. So it's just crazy what they were able to do despite having problems on the defensive end, and to lead the country in turnover margin and be up there in sacks and just be able to kind of game plan around the problem areas and be in the mix for the playoffs is just crazy. And finally, the big game, Ohio State and Michigan. The line was around 7.5. Ohio State for a good chunk of the week, I believe. Might have been around 8.5 when it opened, something like that. I was actually recording part of Polymuse content, if you can believe it, during the first quarter, so I had to go back and rewatch the first quarter there and catch up to watch the rest of the game during a commercial break. My first half notes with Ohio State up 20-17. Is Ohio State going to make adjustments to prevent from getting beat on the back end? 2 big plays are keeping Michigan in this game. Will that open the game up for Corum and Edwards? Well, Michigan tried to move JJ out of the pocket. That's clearly strength, and the Buckeyes are pushing the pocket anyways, even if they aren't getting to him, so play to his strength. Is Ohio State going to make offensive adjustments? Is CJ going to stand there like a statue? And so those are a couple of my notes. Not many adjustments were made by Ohio State, if any. I don't know what the hell they were doing for the back half of this football game at all. Michigan had touchdown passing plays of 69, 75, 45 yards, and running touchdowns of 75 and 85 yards. What in the holy hell? Don't forget, Michigan missed a 57-yard field goal in the third quarter, so they left points on the board in this 45-23 bludgeoning. JJ took exactly what was given to him, and it was 12. He was 12 for 24 for 263 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had 6 carries for 27 yards and a big touchdown late, although he should have followed his blockers into the end zone a little better. Kind of opened himself up to a hit there if I'm being nitpicky. And if I'm being really nitpicky, 2 receivers were wide open for touchdowns, and the other one shook a defender and ran in for a touchdown. So without those big touchdown plays, of which he wide open guys are wide open, and a great effort play by a receiver, he was 9 for 21 for 74 yards. I can't imagine he'll get that in the playoffs when you have to beat 2 of the best teams to win a national championship. So I think we've maybe learned some JJ McCarthy things, like he can find the open guys, he can hit the open guys. He's not afraid to take some of those tough hits head on. We already knew that, I think, though. But man, if those windows tightened up, I'm still not sure what happened. But I'm more completely baffled by what the hell Ohio State did not do, which was much of anything in the second half. Corum barely played, 2 carries and he was out. Something's wrong. Is he going to play the rest of the year? Is it going to matter? Donovan Edwards, 216 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, Corum, you'd think a guy that should be possibly winning a Heisman would be important, but will it? They may not need him for the Big Ten Conference Championship game, and is he a big enough step up from Edwards to make an impact in a playoff game, or is it going to be different factors that are the difference between a win and a loss? Cornelius Johnson had 160 yards and 2 touchdowns on 4 catches. Only 1 sack for Michigan, 0 quarterback hurries. 7 passes deflected as they made it very difficult for CJ at times. He was 31 for 48, 349 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. He does not get out of the pocket at all. He sits there all damn day while Michigan climbs into his lap there. I did not understand that and why they couldn't find some other way to kind of get him out of the pocket as well. They've got to figure out how to get someone more athletic back there. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I always envisioned him as more of a mover back there, and when time came to it, that just wasn't in the playbook, which was kind of astounding. Emeka Egbuka still had 9 catches for 125 and a touchdown. Harrison had 7 for 120 and a touch. They both had 40-plus yard catches. Ohio State had 5 passes defended, 5 tackles for a loss, a sack, a couple quarterback hurries. The defense wasn't awful as far as trying to get some pressure and certainly bottling up the run, particularly in the first half. But they just, if you got past the first line, you were just nothing but green grass. Just completely don't understand it. Just not close at all because no adjustments were made. Purdue will be playing in the Big Ten championship game because Purdue trailed Indiana 7-3 at the half and needed to wake up in the second to win 20-16. Just ugly game there. They were only in the running because Iowa embarrassed themselves and lost to Nebraska 24-17. They had a 24-0 lead. And Casey Thompson, the old transfer, who's been injured and banged up this year for the Huskers, came back in and said, "Hey, I got this," and was able to guide them to a victory over the Hawkeyes. So those are the highlights. Several teams, of course, got bowl eligibility, and let's get into the conference championship slate here for week 14, technically. So you should know the top 25 by the time this podcast is out. Realistically, we have 5 teams right now in the hunt for a playoff berth here, of course. Michigan, Ohio State, USC, TCU, and Georgia. So let's go ahead and get into the conference championship games here this weekend. This Friday, we do have a makeup game between Akron and Buffalo, as Buffalo tries to get to a bowl game. That's at 1 o'clock on Friday. Don't have a network for it yet, but Buffalo's 5-6. Akron's 2-9. Buffalo is favored by 11.5. They've actually lost 3 games in a row, and Akron won its last game against Northern Illinois on the road. So just the last regular season game of the year officially there, as Buffalo was snowed out a couple weeks ago. So we have 11 games technically on the slate. At 7:30 then on the CBS Sports Network, we get the Conference USA Championship, the first game on the slate. North Texas is 7-5. They're playing at UTSA, who is 10-2. Now, North Texas has won 3 of 4 down the stretch, including a 21-17 win over Rice to make the conference championship game. They beat Western Kentucky on the road early in the season. That put them in this game over the Hilltoppers, with both teams finishing 6-2 in conference play. Now, Austin Toone is the quarterback there for the Mean Green. He's 3rd in the conference in passing yards, 2nd in touchdowns, 3rd in yards, 10th in completion percentage at 57.4. That is not good. Now, the squad likes to throw as well as they like to run. 200 yards per game on the ground with a fleet of good running backs there. On the flip side, UTSA has gone undefeated in Conference USA play and is the overwhelming favorite. Now, the line's only 8.5 because neither defense is good at all, both giving up 400-plus yards on the defensive end. Conference USA as a whole, I think 7 of 11 teams are giving up over 400 yards of defense. It's just bad, and lots of good offenses there. Frank Harris is 7th in the country in completion percentage at just under 70. 9th in passing yards with over 3,500. He's tied for 13th in passing touchdowns with 27th nationally. He can hurt you on the ground. I'd like to see if he has a shot at the NFL. It'd be cool to see him there. They have a nice group of receivers. This will be all kinds of points all over the place in Conference USA, and hopefully UTSA will get a fun matchup in a bowl game. But this will be a good, nice little appetizer for the 8 o'clock Fox game coming up here. Number 14, Utah at 9-3, and number 6, USC at 11-1 in Reliance Stadium in Las Vegas. Of course, the Pac-12 playing its conference championship game on Friday per usual. Usually this doesn't have a playoff impact, though. Now, I love watching USC. This is going to be an offensive game like earlier in the year, where Utah won on a 2-point conversion at home. Had they not gone for it, possibly the game goes into overtime. Jordan Addison was hurt towards the back end of the game and did not play, so it did not give USC the option in the last minute to try and make a comeback with their field stretcher. Utah does have the best defense by far in the Pac-12. Run defense, pass defense, total defense, points allowed. 3rd down percentage at about 31%. Both of these teams do convert over 50% of 3rd downs. That is, there's only 8 teams in the whole country that convert over 50%. So these are 2 of them. And they're very much offensive-minded teams. There is no real great defense in the Pac-12, I would argue. Now, USC, giving up yards through the air, allowing quarterbacks to complete 64% of their passes, and having issues generating constant pressure is what's going to end this team. However, they're tied for 16th in the country in sacks, and they're only a couple away from being in the top 5. They're 2nd in interceptions. They fell just below Illinois. Tuipulotu leads the country in sacks. So if they can get him in the mix, that's certainly a more potent defense. So defense is clearly a problem, but they don't turn the ball over. They force turnovers, and they get occasional pressure. It's good game planning. Travis Dye was lost for the season. The running back there, the transfer from Oregon, but Austin Jones is averaging over 6 yards per carry, and actually 6.2 on the year, which was better than Adai, although he doesn't quite have his explosiveness. He had 25 touches last week and did really well. The offense does all kinds of things to give Caleb Williams options offensively to operate, to run around, to throw the ball downfield. Jordan Addison doesn't need many touches to break the game. They give him the ball on end-arounds like they did against Notre Dame. They give him a couple of tosses downfield a game. He doesn't need to be the leader in receptions, certainly, but he can break a game, and they do their best to get him involved. 10 players have double-digit catches on the season and average 10-plus yards per catch, and 8 of those 10 have scored touchdowns. Taj Washington and Mario Williams have 30-plus catches, 500-plus yards, and 14-plus yards per catch as primary weapons outside of Addison, and look pretty solid, as Caleb Williams is just able to find guys. And Williams himself has over 4,000 yards of total offense, 44 touchdowns, and 3 picks on the year. I believe his numbers here. So he is 7th in total passing yardage, tied for 6th with 34 touchdowns, tied for 8th in fewest turnovers, fewest interceptions, and 5th in QBR rating. And that doesn't include, of course, his rushing numbers as well. So this is a great offense. Great game planning to try and make up for the problems that they have on the defensive end. And they're just amazing to watch. Lots of talent all over the place. Last time on the field, Caleb Williams had 381 yards and 5 touchdowns passing and 51 yards on the ground in the loss to Utah. Now the Utes have a solid offense on their end as well. Cam Rising has been struggling a bit recently. He seems to be a little banged up. The offense seems to revolve around the tight end. Well, we know it revolves around the tight end position. Dalton Kincaid has stepped up when some other tight ends have gone down with injuries, and he's the focal point of that offense. They could certainly beat USC again, without a doubt, but I'm not entirely sure that they can slow down USC, despite the fact that they have the better defense. I'm just not sure that happens. And again, Rising has not looked as potent recently, particularly in the Oregon game that they had an opportunity to win. That was bad. That was 2 weeks ago. They smashed Colorado last week. And they have bigger margins of victory than USC has this season. Much bigger margin of victory. And, they beat USC. So when you start to look at these box scores, you start to think, well, Utah should be able to win this one. The line is -3 USC right now, 67-point over-under. It'll be a great football game, obviously big playoff implications, but I really like this USC team in the game planning they're doing. I don't think they can win a national championship, but I would certainly like to see what kind of damage they could do if they made the Final Four playoffs, and I think they have a good shot to do that. Saturday has 2 games at noon, 2 games in the evening, and 4 games locked in the afternoon time slots. It starts with number 12 Kansas State and number 4 TCU at AT&T Stadium on ABC at noon. This is there are 10 conference championship games. 6 of them have rematches, and this is one of them. Now TCU beat Kansas State 38-28 earlier in the season. Adrian Martinez went down in that game. Then Will Howard, the backup. Then Jake Rubley came in and threw one pass for a pick. Then Will Howard came back in to finish the game as TCU scored 21 unanswered points in the second half to win that ball game. At this point, Will Howard has played the last 2.5 games with Adrian Martinez injured again, and he might be better than Adrian going 3-0 in that span. Not sure if Martinez will be back for this football game. Deuce Vaughn has been getting more carries as he should, and he's been very effective. TCU should also have some success on the ground as well, with KSU giving up 153 yards and 2 touchdowns to Kendre Miller in the first go-around. TCU has the number 16th offense altogether. As we know, they've been very potent this year. Johnston should hopefully be healthy. The stud receiver there, Max Duggins, could have a claim to some Heisman votes. KSU's hanging on to a top 40, just inside the top 40 as far as the offense is concerned, and will of course be looking to run the football. This will be a good ball game. TCU is 2.5-point favorite, over under at 62. This will be a great rematch. If TCU loses, I think that depending on how things shake out, they should still be able to make it to the college football playoff. I just can't foresee Alabama or another 2-loss team making it in at this particular point. I just cannot see that. Maybe it bumps Ohio State back into the conversation. I would be fine with that. They'd be 2 one-loss teams without a conference championship title, and you'd have to look at records at that particular point. It might depend on how badly TCU loses if they do. But again, this is one of the closest games with the biggest stakes heading into the weekend here. So TCU and Kansas State on ABC at noon. The other noon game is the MAC Conference Championship game on ESPN. Toledo is 7-5. Ohio is 9-3. Curtis Rourke was injured against Miami of Ohio a couple weeks back and is out for the season for Ohio. He was the top quarterback in the league. He had 3,200 yards, 25 touchdowns, 4 picks, 68% completion rating on the season. That was a bad loss for them. His backup did win against Bowling Green, but he wasn't really fantastic. He had 3 rushing touchdowns, was a bad thrower, not super great there. Toledo backed into this game after losing 2 straight. Daquan Finn was supposed to be a great star in the MAC, but he's struggled as a thrower. Tucker Gleason is the backup who's gotten time. He's completing less than 50% of his passes. They've been a turnover machine recently. Each of these teams has only 1 win against another bowl team. Now, last year we had some good MAC conference play. We had some good quarterbacks. Kent State had a good offense and a potential NFL player there in Dustin Crum coming into the season, even though that did not really hold together there. But this year's been kind of some ugly MAC-tion play. And with the top quarterback being out, This could still be very entertaining, but this is probably one of the later games on the slate. 2.5-point favorites are Toledo in the MAC Conference Championship game. Speaking of teams without quarterbacks, moving into the afternoon, 3:30 on ESPN, following up the MAC Conference Championship game is the Sun Belt. Grayson McCall went down for Coastal Carolina several weeks back, the star there who guided that team to a top 25 ranking in 2020 and 2021, I believe, and just a sad way for him to go out. Maybe he can play for a bowl game. I can't remember if that was an arm or a leg or a foot or nose, ankle. I can't remember at this particular point, but he might be back for a bowl game. There is no quarterback backup plan without him. They squeaked by Southern Miss. They had the Virginia game canceled. The one game they've played since was against James Madison, and they were thumped 47-7. Just no quarterbacks. Really great there. They finished 9-2 in the regular season. They'll be playing 10-2 Troy, who was a really great team. They're 8.5-point favorites here with a 48.5-point over-under. A great defensive club. There have been a number of really great teams in the Sun Belt this season, which was not projected to necessarily look that year, with coaches like Billy Napier leaving Louisiana and a few other changes, but several teams came out of that. South Alabama was in the running for quite a while there. We have these two squads. We had Appalachian State, who unfortunately went 6-6, but had a nice game early in the year against North Carolina. Marshall and Old Dominion grabbed big wins. James Madison bumped up to the top level of football here and had a great year. Had they been eligible, they would have made the conference championship game. So great job by that group. So just a good solid year for the Sun Belts, and several coaches there will probably have Power 5 opportunities pretty soon here. Trojans have a negative turnover margin, not a great offense. They're going to run the ball. They're going to play really good defense. They have wins over Western Kentucky on the road this year, South Alabama on the road this year. They played a not too bad game on the road at Ole Miss, a 28-10 loss in the opener. They beat Marshall. They lost close to Appalachian State. Not a horrible team, but with Coastal Carolina losing its quarterback and the main portion of its offense there, it's going to be a little bit of a slugfest. Not sure how this is going to go. But again, 8.5. This is one of the biggest margins on the slate, unfortunately. Tough finish for Coastal Carolina. This is going to be, much like the MAC Conference Championship game, a little bit of a slog, I think, on the Saturday slate. So let's head to a bigger game. CBS, of course, at 4 o'clock. We'll have number 1 Georgia, number 5 LSU. This is a 17.5-point spread. It, of course, went up after LSU lost last week to Texas A&M in a bummer there. Jaden Daniels was all locked up. Now, we can go over stats and numbers, but the point of this is, if Georgia loses, they might drop a couple spots, but they're still going to make the playoffs. We're not sure how seriously they're going to take this game. They've been playing around with their food a bit recently. Earlier in the season, middle of the season, it's autopilot for most of the year. Jaden Daniels is the driving force for LSU, although they've been able to get some of the front lines and that front seven on defense together to create some pressure. The receiving core is great on the offensive side. They may have finally found a running back. They've needed some talent there to kind of supplement what Jaden Daniels has been doing, so it looks like they may have a guy there. And Josh Williams, who's done a great job, especially recently. He's now averaging 5.2 yards per carry and has got 6 touchdowns on the year. But Jaden Daniels is still the leading carrier, almost twice as many carries as Williams on the season, almost twice as many rushing touchdowns. And of course, he's got his quarterback numbers, 15 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions, but some lower numbers there. 68% completion, less than 3,000 yards, 25.66 at 7.4 yards per completion. And when he has bad games, he has bad games. You can keep him in the pocket. You can cause problems. And Georgia's going to do just what Georgia does. Now, Georgia, again, has really only been challenged a couple times all season. They crushed Oregon. They crushed Tennessee. They crushed Florida. Missouri, they obviously trailed that game, but came back and won that one. And with plenty of time, 10 minutes left in the ball game, I believe. They beat Mississippi State. They won by 10 at Kentucky in a game that they really had a handle on all the way through. They've had no problems this year. They've had no problems the entire season. Georgia hasn't. Now, LSU could give them some problems with that red zone offense. Georgia has not been executing super well once they get into the red zone, and that could certainly be an issue. So it's certainly possible LSU covers the spread here, but I think Georgia's going to obviously take this a little bit more serious, and hell, they may not even do that because they're still going to make the playoffs. So scratch that. CBS, LSU, and Georgia. I just wouldn't put too much thought into this game. Georgia will be in the playoffs, whether they win by 3 or 30. Next, 4 o'clock, 22nd at the moment, Central Florida and 19th Tulane. Tulane's 10-2. Central Florida's 9-3. Central Florida did win this game earlier in the season. The final score was 38-31 for the Knights, and it's been kind of a slog since then. They lost to Navy, and they struggled against South Florida last week. Now, they did play with Rise Plumlee in the game originally against Tulane. They've juggled quarterbacks since then with Mikey Keene getting involved. And Tulane, in their own right, has gotten the offense going at times. It's gotten the defense going at times. Again, it's only been a couple weeks since they last played, but Tulane has had success against both. Cincinnati last week in a 27-24, slower, lower to the ground defensive battle, and a 59-24 shootout against SMU, taking advantage of the defensive deficiencies that they have there on the Mustangs. Now, although Tulane lost, they are favored by 3.5 in New Orleans here, their place of business, with the 56.5 over-under. The numbers say they're not excellent against the run, but they are against the pass. UCF loves to run the ball, but they've had some issues recently, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And Tulane has had things going recently with Spears and Pratt at the running back and quarterback positions. Two, they're able to certainly get things going, although they don't necessarily have elite statistics in those particular areas. So Tulane, the Green Wave, looks to actually capitalize and follow this through from an early ranking from Cincinnati kind of losing a game early against Arkansas, and Houston falling off early. Cincinnati and Houston playing the American Conference game last season, with Cincinnati winning that one and meeting their goal to make the playoffs. Obviously, both missing this year. Tulane, after a few weeks, looked like a team that could have that pathway, and it looks like they may follow it through, even though they lost to Central Florida earlier. Still making the conference championship game here by beating Cincinnati, and it looks like they'll be in good shape here to beat Central Florida. They're just looking like the better ball club right now. Ever since South Florida beat this team, they have not quite looked the same. The quarterback's not quite the same. The defense is just having problems all over the place. This will be enjoyable because the winner will presumably play a Power 5 team in a New Year's Six Bowl, hopefully. So we'll get to see how that team matches up. But Tulane is looking pretty solid right now. Central Florida, if they do manage to win, it'll be because of their fun option offense, because the defense is finally able to tighten up a little bit there and to restrain what Tulane's able to do. So this will be one of the more exciting ball games on the entire slate. That still has a little bit of stakes, even if it's not playoff related. So keep an eye on Central Florida and Tulane. The last one, the 4 o'clock slot, hails from the Mountain West, and the only two teams worth watching from that conference right now, 4 o'clock, Fox. Boise State's a 3-point favorite with a 54-point over-under. The Broncos are 9-3 and undefeated in Mountain West play. They're they're playing Fresno State, who's 8-4 and 7-1 in Mountain West Conference play. This isn't Boise, Idaho. I think they are hosting it on the blue turf. Could be wrong. Bulldogs. Jake Haener missed time earlier in the season. He's back now, and they've blowtorched everyone they've played, and that's about the story of Fresno State. A top quarterback who could have played at a Power 5 level in a smaller conference. They lost to Boise State 40-20 when he was out, and have since won 8 straight after starting 7 straight over San Jose State, New Mexico, San Diego State, Hawaii, UNLV, Nevada, and Wyoming. Most of those just blowing the doors off people, including a 30-0 win over Wyoming last week. He has over 2,400 yards, 73% completion percentage, 17 touches, and 3 touchdowns. The offensive line is a little bit iffy. That could be a problem. Mims has got over 1,000 yards rushing at almost 5 yards per carry, and 14 touchdowns on the season for the Fresno State Bulldogs, and the defense is not horrific either. They seem to have a solid defense on that side of things as well. It's just the quarterback play when he went down was very, very bad. They lost to Boise State. They lost to UConn, which doesn't look as bad now. They lost to USC, and they lost to Oregon State by 3 points, all in a row there when he was out. Games they certainly could have won a couple of those, if not all 4 of those, if he was still involved. So he has not lost a game as a starter. Boise State fired their offensive coordinator earlier in the season. Hank Bachmeier, the returning senior quarterback for this season, actually entered the transfer portal. He might have been the first kid to do it this year, just a few games into the season. The quarterback that ended up taking over the starting job there was true freshman, I believe it was, listed as freshman, Taylon Green, the 6'6" mobile quarterback, who has since had time to grow throughout the season and not losing a conference championship game. Completing 64% of his passes, 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions so far this year, another 8 touchdowns on the ground, so 20 total for him. And Boise State, decent on the defensive end as well, but again, a lot of putrid offenses in the Mountain West, and the best offense in Fresno State. They played essentially with no engine in it, so do with that as you will. The offense, once it gets going, can really do some damage. They beat up on Utah State last week, 42-23, and it'll just be good to see these two teams playing in a healthy manner. I think well rounded out on the roster that Boise State's the better team, but if they can't stop the much better quarterback play of Jake Haener, they're going to have some problems. They do have a 1,000-yard rusher of their own on the Boise side, and Hoini, who's averaging 5.3 per carry and 10 touchdowns on the season. So they do have some good weapons on both sides. But this should be a good Mountain West game. Neither team playing for a New Year's Six game as it appears right now. Boise State took a loss to Oregon State to start the season, which wasn't too bad, but then they lost to UTEP, which was bad, BYU, which looks pretty bad now. So kind of rough down the stretch there. But Fresno State kind of rounding into the better ball club from the offensive side. This will be a good ball game. It's going to fall in the shadow of the SEC championship game, especially if LSU is able to keep it interesting, but certainly keep this one in the back of your mind as a possible channel flipper, and keep an eye on Jake Haener. That's an interesting kid. Taylon Green, the freshman, is an interesting college football as he continues to play out the rest of his career for at least a couple more years here. So just keep an eye on that Mountain West Conference Championship game as your sneaky non-Power 5 game to kind of keep an eye on. Besides the UTSA one, that Conference USA Championship, well, we'll see a lot of points, and Frank Harris for UTSA will be interesting to the Roadrunners. So those two are kind of the non-Power 5 games that are more exciting to watch, if you ask me. So heading into our nightcap, our two evening games here are two games that are not quite as exciting, unfortunately. Really, the Big 12 championship game with TCU and the Pac-12 with USC, which will be decided Friday night, are the highlights there. So by noon, you kind of have some time to kind of hang out. Obviously, there's a couple non-Power 5 ones that should be fun to watch. But at 8 o'clock on Fox, you'll get the Big 10. Number 3, Michigan, as of right now, at 12-0, hosting Purdue, who is 8-4. 16.5-point favorites are the Wolverines with a 51.5-point over-under. Purdue is just not very good. Purdue is not a very good football team. It's astounding that they had to come from behind to beat Indiana last week in order to get into this ball game. It's unfortunate that Aiden O'Connell, the starting quarterback there, has had some struggles this season. He could have been the best quarterback in the league this year, but has certainly struggled. It is unfortunate. He has lost a brother this week, and he won't even be prepping with the team for most of the week. Just very unfortunate there, but he's not even going to be practicing with the team from a micro, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, football game. So from a micro perspective, in the grand scheme of life, he's not even with the team right now. He should be playing in the conference championship game, and it's just going to change things. So I assume the Boilermakers will, of course, be playing hard for him, but this is a team that's been all over this year. I did project them to win the topsy-turvy West, so I'm excited to see them here. But man, it's been a struggle. They lost to Syracuse to begin the season, 32-29. That Syracuse team that started 6-0, lost 5 straight games, had to luck out to win their last game of the season. Nearly went 6-0, then finished 0-6. They did beat Florida Atlantic 28-26, a team that's not going bowling. They won by 2 at Maryland, who's a good football team. They beat Nebraska by only 6 points. They got thumped by Iowa 24-3. They sneaked by Northwestern 17-9, who did not win the United States this year. They snuck by Indiana last week 30-16. This is not a good ball club. You thought certain players on the defense would step up, even if the entirety of that group is not very good. They found a little bit of a ground game to supplement the passing attack this year in Maccabee, who did all right with over 800 yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground. Although it wasn't an elite showing from the ground game either, it was still something. But O'Connell, 31-24 as far as passing yards, 63% completion, 22 touchdowns, 11 picks. Offensive line was okay at times. Defense was meh. The best player on the offensive side on that team arguably was Charlie Jones, who had 1,199 yards, 97 catches, 12.4 yards per catch, and 12 touchdowns. One of the best receivers in the country. Stuck on this Boilermaker team that just did not quite pan out. I don't know if O'Connell has a future in the NFL or not. I'm not sure what the future is going to hold for the Boilermakers, who are really overachieved, but just did not look good doing it. Michigan, we know about by now. Is Blake Corum going to be healthy for this game? We don't know. Is he going to be out for the rest of the season? We don't know. Can he figure something out by the playoffs? Presuming they make it there to be healthy, hopefully. J.J. McCarthy was able to really exploit an Ohio State defense that looked stiff last week. Did not make a lot of adjustments in the secondary. This will be a ground and pound for a Michigan team that's 12th and third down defensive percentage allowed. That's top 10 infused penalties in the country. That's only given up 10 touchdowns in the red zone this season. That's tied with Illinois and Air Force and 2 off from Georgia. So you do not score on them in the red zone. Only 23 trips allowed and 10 touchdowns converted. So besides all the other gaudy stats, you just don't score. You don't convert. They don't hurt themselves. They don't turn the ball over. They run it down your throat. And until we get to the playoffs where we start to play some comparable teams to really what they can do, Purdue's not going to be the team to slow them down. And finally, a game that's been taken way down several notches. At 8 o'clock on ABC is the ACC Conference Championship game. Clemson and North Carolina both lost last week. So Clemson's 10-2, North Carolina's 9-3. The line has now moved wider, and Clemson's way 7.5. 63.5 point over under. The quarterback position is pretty bad for Clemson. Actually, if you traded Drake May to Clemson, that team would actually be significantly better, but still have problems. Are there any good receivers on this team? Like really, we're not talking like win 10 games. We're talking go 14-0 and win a national championship team. Are there any of that volume type receivers on there? Will Shipley's a great running back, but the offense hasn't run through him for a good chunk of most of their games. And it should have. He's really good. The offensive line seems to be okay more times than not. The 4- and 5-star quarterbacks that roll in there seem to have question marks. And a defensive front that was supposed to have 7 new bodies ready to go to the NFL. 7 guys that could start for any team in the country had injuries and all kinds of problems, and then wasn't terribly effective throughout the season. The secondary had injuries too, but I don't know what kind of threat the offense is when South Carolina's rolling up yardage on you, a team that's putrid by all accounts. And Spencer Rattler, who not only fell out of the Heisman conversation, but out of the radar altogether. They just look bad. They look bad, and several other teams could have beat them this year, including Syracuse, who also looks bad. North Carolina, on the other hand, when Drake May doesn't throw for 300-something yards and a handful of touchdowns, just loses games. And Mac Brown has been rolling in top recruiting classes for several years since he retook that position, and I don't understand why he can't get all the pieces to fit together. Now, 9-3 is excellent. It was bad last week against a good defense in NC State, which has suffered from horrible offensive problems in themselves, no quarterbacks there, and that was when Leary came back, who's supposed to be a good quarterback in the conference. Whether he was hurt or injured this year, they had problems of their own, but North Carolina just could not figure it out, could not do it, and they couldn't figure out how to win convincingly in like any game this year, and the ACC was bad. The ACC was a bad group this year. The winner of this conference this game is going to be turned off by most people. They're going to watch Michigan destroy Purdue because that team is going to be in a national championship or at least a playoff game. North Carolina nearly lost to Appalachian State, beat Georgia State by 7, and beat Miami, Duke, Pittsburgh, Virginia, Wake Forest by possession or less. And most of those teams a handful of those teams aren't going to bowl games at all. It's just rough. So this game will be on TV. I don't know if it'll be any good. We'll see flaws, I think, from both of these teams, the crown jewels of the ACC. But man, it's been a very rough year for this conference. All right, by my count, 9 of 14 ACC teams have qualified for bowls, 8 of 10 Big 12, 9 of 14 Big 10, 7 of 12 Pac-12, with 6 of them being 9-3 or better. That's crazy. 11 of 14 SEC. Of the non-Power 5 conferences, 7 of 11 American teams have made it, 5 of 11 Conference USA teams, 5 or 6 out of 12 from the MAC because Buffalo hasn't completed its schedule yet. Mountain West has 7 of 12 teams. The Sun Belt has 8 of 14. You have to strike James Madison, obviously with 9-3, but they are not eligible to make a bowl game yet due to just some weird rules saying that they can't make a bowl game or make the conference championship game due to just making it up to this division, which is stupid. Independents, 4 of the 7 independents are eligible for a bowl game. By my count, that's about 81 teams, including Buffalo, and there are 86 spots for bowls. Is that right? Or is there 82? 42 bowl games. So we might get some 5 and 7 bowl teams in. I discussed basically every team being 6 and 6 or better, 5 and 7 basically an eliminator. But we get that pretty much every year now with bowls, more and more bowl games coming, which kind of sucks. And it seems like every year we get a smaller team that goes 6 and 6 and doesn't make a bowl game. So it would be so fitting for Connecticut to celebrate a 6 and 6 season and get left out because it has no bowl ties as an independent, and for like a 5 and 7 crummy Michigan State team or someone else to make it in. That would just be so fitting. We have the Army-Navy game next week on CBS in the middle of the afternoon. Both teams not so good. 4 and 7 is Navy, 5 and 6 is Army, but they will have cool uniforms for that. Then we will start bowl season. I think the only one that's been announced so far is UAB and Miami of Ohio at 11:30 a.m. on ESPN on Friday, December 16th for the Bahamas Bowl. That's the only one that is locked in so far. Nope, Christmas Eve we have the Hawaii Bowl locked in as well between 7-5 San Diego State and 7-5 Middle Tennessee. That one's in as well. So we have a couple so far plugged in between some of the smaller teams. And so we'll certainly tackle the bowl games coming up here. But enjoy your watching. Thanks for tuning in again. You should have the ranking show going on by the time you listen to this podcast and kind of know where everyone fits in prior to entering the big conference championship game week. Hopefully some of these games are entertaining. Again, there may be a couple of the non-Power 5 games that are better to watch, more entertaining to view than some of the Power 5 matchups. I'll be keeping an eye on TCU and USC, who are some of the closer games. Obviously, the American Conference Championship game there, and Conference USA Mountain West should be entertaining as well. So enjoy your watches, and I'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Please don't forget the money, man. All my blessings, 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 all my blessings.
I need my blessings every penny, daily counting every single one of